is going to be this holiday season? It's the new Nintendo 64. So what's the big deal, and why is Toys R Us already sold out? We have the answers.
It's me, Mario! I experienced the era of the Nintendo 64 in parallel with the beginning of my PC journey, so during the 90s you could say I was spoiled for choice. Although the Nintendo 64 did not sell as well as its main competitor, the PlayStation, it wasn't just a console that was less successful. Instead, it was a different experience altogether. In typical Nintendo fashion, their goal was to innovate rather than simply compete on equal ground. I know that the N64 controller does not rank very high in the best controls of all time list. However, I like it. Not just because it's unique, but it's also very comfortable. Look, it just is, and whoever says otherwise is wrong. They also kept the cartridge as the medium of choice for game distribution, which was more resilient than CDs and had faster loading times than the CD, but this also came with the setback of limited storage space. My first contact with the N64 was when I visited my cousin Christopher, and he had this strange looking machine with a cartridge loaded on top that read, Mario 64. What? I'm trying to find the words to describe what the first time I played Mario 64 felt like. It was such a surreal experience. It was like I had time traveled far into the future and skipped a few generations of gaming evolution. It was too good to be true. Not only did the game look great, the soundtrack still bangs, and look, you can only hope to have had at least one experience like this in your life. I know it sounds a little nerdy talking about a game as if it was life-changing, but Mario 64 and the N64 in general really drew me in. I used to frequently have dreams that were heavily influenced by the setting of specifically the water levels in the game and the music. Oh, the music. I remember a dream I had when I was a kid where I was at an area somewhere near a beach surrounded by family members, and I was floating in the sky in one of those water levels where you swim around picking up red coins. But in this dream, I was not chasing coins, nor were there walls. I was just swimming in water that was floating high up in the air. It was a dream. It's supposed to be weird, but it was good weird. When I first realized that this amazing console existed, all I wanted was to find myself somewhere where there's an N64. I was addicted. I needed to have one of my own immediately. So I started saving every cent I could get my hands on, asked my dad to let me work for him, helping him clean his shop, going alongside him at weddings and christenings for his photography business, and not only did he let me tag along, he even did me the favor of paying me for acting as if I was taking photos that he could actually use. He told me that he used some of my photos, however I'm pretty sure that the films I used up cost more than the few photos of mine that he did in fact use. But hey, that's what good parents do. As soon as I managed to gather 160 Cypriot pounds, which is what the console cost at that time and is the equivalent of approximately 300 USD, my mom drove me to the mall, and I can tell you now, those 160 pounds were possibly my most happily spent money ever. Being the silly little boy that I was, I hadn't thought that I also needed games to play. So my mother stepped in and got me a game to help get this journey started. Mario Kart 64 was my first game on the N64, and I can honestly say I became pretty good at it. Look, I'll show you. For the most part, the tracks are fun and bright, and the fact that the gameplay is as good as it is made it a racing game that keeps you glued to your screen for hours on end. That's exactly what it did for me. I learned the tracks, tried to get all the cups in all the difficulties. It's just such a good game. There are of course also some really annoying tracks that I just really hated playing. Looking at you, Banshee Boardwalk. However, overall it is a great game. I'm still trying to find the words to describe what it truly felt like to play Super Mario 64 for the first time. Awe-inspiring. Surreal. Like playing a dream in real life. You must understand, it may not look like much today, however when it first came out it was revolutionary. There really was nothing like it in the sense of the total package. The graphics, the very surreal and trippy open world, trippy being the key word here. The movement was very responsive and the details in the way Mario's movements were programmed made you feel like you were moving a character with actual weight. He didn't just start running at his max speed, instead he accelerated, and similarly when stopping, he decelerated. When he would jump, there was a jump animation instead of the character model just starting to move upwards. These things, simple as they may sound in 2025, were a big part of the reason Mario 64 was such a massive hit. The camera system was also something new and they implemented it very well. You had the option to view Mario from behind or use the C buttons to rotate it to your liking. You could even hit C up to go into POV mode, albeit Mario would stand still in this mode. Sure, there were moments that the camera would give you a hard time, however it was, as was the game as a whole, a new feature that we did not have up to that time. It was sort of a first draft. The world, as with Mario Kart's tracks, was vibrant and felt populated despite being fairly limited in regards to the number of NPCs in each stage. Also, as with most games I played through my childhood, Mario 64 has a great soundtrack. I'm starting to see a pattern here. Here it is, the stage that was the basis of my dream that I was talking about. There's just something about it. Eventually, I realized I needed to expand my game collection up from a grand total of 1 game. The end of the school year was approaching, so I made a deal with my parents that if I get decent grades at my end of year exams, they would get me a new game. I did well and I went shopping. I was at the game shop downtown looking at my options at the N64 section, and I didn't really know anything about any of these games as, once more, the internet was not as widespread as it is now. So we did not know all details about all games that came out ever. So my main criteria for choosing was the box art. After looking at each box over and over again and then checking out the tiny in-game screenshots at the back of each box, I decided to get Fighter's Destiny. Now, Fighter's Destiny is not exactly a GOAT contender in any sense. However, it stood out from other fighting games in terms of what you needed to do to win. You did not need to deplete the other player's health bar. Instead, you had to perform moves that gave you points, and to win, you needed to reach a certain amount of points. A throwdown would give you 2 points, a knockdown 3 points, and so on. To be honest, I think Fighter's Destiny was a really underrated game. The concept was unique and well executed. The moves were complicated enough to be difficult to master, but not too difficult to the point where you didn't want to even try. There was a decent variety of characters, each with their own unique style. The music fit a fighting game well. It was generally good fun. One of my most memorable moments from my childhood that I still joke about to this day whenever I meet up with my cousin, who I used to play Fighter's Destiny with, happened in one of our epic battles. We were in a fight and I managed to perform a successful throwdown, to which he instantly said loudly, "Rekam struden," which translates to "you performed a throwdown" in Greek. However, it was hilarious because it was so spontaneous, so loud, and for some reason he even pronounced the R the way it is pronounced when speaking French. It was so random, we just both burst out laughing. Another game where my cousin and I had epic battles was Snowboarding 1080. Another great game with a lot of replayability due to the fact that it was a racing game, so there's no actual end goal. You just play and try to do better each time. There was a mode where instead of racing through a course, you had to get as high a score as possible by doing stunts. I had a serious advantage over my cousin as I had the N64 available to me all day, every day. So eventually I was able to grind out all the top scores in all tracks except one. There is a track where you jump from a high ramp and have to do all your tricks before you land. My cousin somehow some way, did a combo of moves that resulted in a very high score that no matter how much I tried, no matter how much I grinded the plastic of the joystick to a fine powder, I never managed to beat or even get close to. If he had spent a little more time on the game, who knows if I would have had all those high scores, or any at all. A worthy opponent.
There still exists a general state of either denial, complacency, or even apathy about both the reality and the potential effects of Y2K.
Eventually, the end of the millennium was approaching. The world was losing its mind over this arbitrary moment in time that humans defined would be the moment that the number we count years in would change from 1999 to 2000. Computers would crash, electricity grids would shut off, plunging countries into darkness, planes would fall from the sky, and I would be playing GoldenEye 007 while listening to the first CD I had ever purchased, I've Been Expecting You by Robbie Williams, which of course also had a track named Millennium. It's a great song, by the way. Woo! This right here is what we call a core memory. Whenever I think back to the late 90s, one of my first memories, if not the first, is me playing GoldenEye on my N64 that was connected to my 14-inch Panasonic TV in my room during the Christmas period while Robbie Williams is singing in the background.
We were born, got some slow down before we fall down.
This is a reference that only my sister will understand. Panasonic, 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 Panasonic. Moving on. Around the time when kids who owned N64s had expanded their collections was when the great era of cartridge lending commenced. Look, games were expensive. There were no cheap third-party games. All games had a premium price tag. So instead of buying games, we started borrowing games from each other. In a few months' time, I had played more games than I had played in the first 3 years of owning my N64. Since we were not buying these games, we did not feel the need to play them until the cartridge melted, so my relationship with these games is not as deep as with the ones mentioned previously. However, I did enjoy them nonetheless. Here are some quick fire mentions. Extreme G. Extreme G was a high-speed futuristic motorcycle racer focused on obviously speed and aggressive combat. It featured twisting tube-like track designs and a large arsenal of weapons, delivering absolute mayhem. F-Zero X. F-Zero X was another futuristic racer that had simpler graphics but ran at 60 FPS even when there were 30 vehicles on the screen. This one was also very chaotic, but if you focused more on racing rather than fighting the other cars, you could do well, and the 60 FPS it ran at allowed you to really experience the high speeds in a different way. International Superstar Soccer 64. ISS 64 was an early arcade-style football game which did not have the rights to use the real names of players, so they used random names that in most cases were not even similar to the original ones. However, with my friends we were able to deduce that the Brazilian Ronaldo was the in-game player Alejo, or Alejo, I don't know how you want to pronounce it. He had the best stats and he was bold. It wasn't too difficult to deduce. The game gave you the option to create custom players with random base stats, and you were then given some extra points that you could allocate to the stats of your choice. I once created a player that had all of his stats maxed out, but I couldn't save him since I did not have a memory card at that time. My friends never believed me. He had everything at 99. It happened. Please believe me. Shadowgate 64. Shadowgate 64 is a first-person adventure puzzle game that borrows some elements from the point-and-click genre and applies them into a three-dimensional world. It involves exploration and solving puzzles within a mysterious castle, with the puzzles and the atmosphere being the main focus over action. Wave Race 64. Wave Race 64 is a gorgeous jet ski racer that really looked much better than it had the right to. Many discussions had been had about its water physics, and considering it's a jet ski racer, that's a good thing, as you can imagine. The waves affect gameplay and can make or break a run depending on how you hit them. It is a game that anyone can pick up a controller, play and enjoy. However, the skill ceiling was pretty high, so novice players stood no chance against more experienced players. The courses were very well designed, and I still remember most of them very fondly. Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. I did not spend much time on this game, as neither I or any of my friends had a copy of it, so I only got to play it at the Pizza Hut near my house that had an N64 stand with a copy of it. I watched videos of it recently trying to remember what it looked like, and geez, it looks so plain and empty now. However, back in the day I liked it so much that I would pressure my parents to go to Pizza Hut just so that I could play some more Shadows of the Empire. Blast Corps. In a few words, you win by destroying stuff in order to clear a path for a nuclear missile carrier so that it doesn't, well, destroy even more stuff. Many more stuff. It was very exciting and fast-paced, and even required some puzzle solving skills from time to time. And then came the big boys. Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Castlevania, Banjo-Kazooie, GoldenEye. There were obviously some other big titles out there as well, however, these were the ones I personally played. The Zelda games, you all know them. Ocarina of Time is still to this day considered by many to be the greatest game of all time. There is a reason this game has a rating of 99 on Metacritic, and still at the time of recording this video, 27 years since it was released, it is sitting on first place on the best games of all time list. Simply amazing. By the way, let me just point out that from the top 6 games on Metacritic, 4 of them are Nintendo games. Ocarina of Time at first, Super Mario Galaxy 4th, Super Mario Galaxy 2 is 5th, and Zelda Breath of the Wild is 6th. 2 Zeldas and 2 Marios. Nintendo found a formula that worked a long time ago, and they have only been improving on it ever since. Ocarina of Time was the first 3D open-ish world game I ever played. There were many times where I didn't feel like questing, and instead I would find myself just running around Hyrule Field just searching if there are any secrets to find. And if memory serves me well, there were. Okay, the rewards of exploring the world of an open world game in modern games are definitely more fine-tuned to make it worth your time. However, in Ocarina of Time, you would just find the occasional rupee or two, and it felt great. However, the point of this game, the reason why it was so great, is not due to its open world elements or any other singular feature, but instead because of a combination of things, such as its graphics, its storytelling, the music, and of course, its gameplay. Nintendo had a habit of reinventing the way games can be played using the N64 controller, and somehow they always made it work. There's not much more to say. You all know the game, you have all seen videos and read articles about it, and it is without a doubt, and for good reason, one of the greatest games of all time. Majora's Mask was the sequel to Ocarina of Time, and although it is also a great game running on the same engine as its prequel, it introduced a new mechanic that made the game more of a strategic time management puzzle rather than it just being an open world adventure like Ocarina of Time was, and this was a change that not all players liked. However, it is still very high in the all times ranking list, sitting neatly on place 43. Very nice. Castlevania Legacy of Darkness was one of those games where all the time I spent on it, I spent alone. Not because it was a single player game, which it was. I mean, Zelda was a single player game and I played the game with friends all the time. I felt like the game's dark setting and storyline could be experienced better solo. The music perfectly matched the setting and really added to the atmosphere. I actually finished Castlevania with all 4 characters, but for some reason, on different profiles. I don't know why. If there was something to unlock by doing this on a single profile, I missed out. Banjo-Kazooie is one of the few games, if not the only game, where I never skip the intro. The intro song is so damn catchy. With Banjo-Kazooie, Rare created a very beloved game in the sense that I don't think I've ever heard anyone say or write anything negative about it. I think it's popular enough that the people who liked it still praise it, and the people who didn't like it either don't remember it or didn't find it popular enough to comment on. Does that make sense? It utilized the jungle aesthetic that was popular back then with great effect, the music and audio effects perfectly tailored to match the aesthetic, along with some fun gameplay and quests or challenges that were at the time in fact challenging and actually not annoying. That on its own would be enough to make it a great game. Love it. And last, but definitely, absolutely, positively, and without a moment's doubt, not least, GoldenEye. GoldenEye is embedded in my brain in the persistent childhood memories section. Practically every time that I think about the early 2000s or late 90s, the first thing that comes into mind is the memory I mentioned earlier. It's around Christmas 1999, I am sitting alone in my room at night in front of my 14-inch CRT TV that we got for free with my sister's computer, with GoldenEye in my N64, Robbie Williams, I've been expecting you playing in the background, and I am frantically trying to unlock the last 2 stages of the game. You know what's tragic though? GoldenEye is one of the cartridges I lended to someone and never got back. Add in GoldenEye N64 cartridge to cart, check out, and pay. What was it about GoldenEye that glued us so much to the screen? Was it the familiarity with the franchise, or was it simply a good game? There still exist very passionate communities about GoldenEye, including speedrunning communities, of which I am a big fan of. I played the game so much that I ended up playing it like an open world game of sorts, in the sense that I would sometimes join levels and just check every room, every corner, every piece of furniture in search of some sort of secret. These were great times indeed. Oh, and by the way, 18th on the all-time rankings. Nintendo absolutely killed it with the N64. Wow.
United against the might of the Burning Legion.
In 2003, my time had come to finish school and to do my 2 years of mandatory National Guard duty, so for the N64 at least, an era had come to an end. Salut mon ami. And somewhere here is where my journeys from this video and my previous video meet. Where were we again? Oh yeah.